Israel is quiet on its next steps against Iran. Their war cabinet has met to discuss a possible response. The White House, meanwhile, has warned Israel that the United States will not participate in any retaliatory strikes on Iran. G7 leaders offered their full support for Israel following an attack by Iran and said that they were ready to take further measures in response to further destabilizing initiatives. A 24-year-old student from India was shot dead inside a car in Canada's South Vancouver. The Vancouver police, in a statement, said Chirag Antil was found dead inside a vehicle in the area after neighbors reported hearing gunshots. Donald Trump is poised to become the first former U.S. president to face a criminal trial, a watershed moment for American democracy as the Republican nominee fights a divisive battle to retake the White House. Well, you are watching The World 24/7 on NDTV. I'm Parmeshwar Bava. Israel is weighing its response to Iran's unprecedented missile and drone assault on its territory, signaling that it would not immediately act alone, but insisting its forces remained on high alert and that the leadership had approved both offensive and defensive action. Here are the latest details for you. After Iran rained down missiles and drones on Israel, in its first attack targeting Israel directly from its own soil, roughly 2 weeks after it alleged that Tel Aviv had destroyed its consulate in Damascus, Israel is debating a response to Iran's attack with or without US support. While Israel's defensive system, Iron Dome, shielded a majority of the attack with limited damage on the ground, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and his 5-member war cabinet met for the first time since the attack to discuss Tel Aviv's response to the strike. This comes after US President Joe Biden, as well as the G7 countries, condemned Iran's strikes, while Washington made it clear it will not participate in any offensive action against Tehran.
Well, where things stand this morning is just an incredible military achievement by Israel and, quite frankly, the United States and other partners that helped Israel defend itself against more than 300 drones and missiles. Whether and how the Israelis will respond, that's going to be up to them. We understand that and respect that. But the president's been very clear. We don't seek a war with Iran. We're not looking for escalation here.
Warning that the Middle East is on the brink, the UN also called for de-escalation of violence in the Middle East during an emergency session of the UN Security Council.
The Middle East is on the brink. The people of the region are confronting a real danger of a devastating full-scale conflict. Now is the time to defuse and de-escalate. Now is the time for maximum restraint.
After firing at least 300 drones and missiles into Israeli territory, Iran said it had ended its assault on Israel, saying it does not want to escalate the conflict, but will respond forcefully if Israel retaliates.
این عملیات از نظر ما خاتمه یافته است و قصدی بر ادامه این عملیات وجود نداره، اما چنانچه رژیم صهیونیستی اقدامی رو علیه جمهوری اسلامی ایران چه در خاک ما.
אתמול יצאה איראן למתקפה על ישראל ופגשה את עוצמתה של מערכת הביטחון הישראלית. איראן היא בעיה עולמית, היא אתגר אזורי והיא גם סכנה לישראל. ואתמול התייצב העולם באופן ברור ביחד עם ישראל מול הסכנה.
While the United States, along with Israel's Iron Dome, shot down most of Iran's drones and missiles, militaries of the United Kingdom and Jordan also shot down many drones. Meanwhile, India expressed its concerns about the conflict and called for an immediate de-escalation in the initial hours of the attack. Foreign Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar also spoke to his Iranian counterpart on the release of 17 Indians on board the seized Israeli vessel MSC Ares, as well as his Israeli counterpart on the escalating crisis in West Asia. Reports also indicate that Iran gave Turkey, Jordan and Iraq 72 hours notice before its assault on Israel. But the United States denied receiving any such warning. As turmoil in the region continues, only time will tell how it impacts the world. With Disha Bagchi and Vishal Vivek, Parmeshwar Bava for NDTV. Well, the threat of open warfare erupting between the West Asia foes and dragging in the United States has put the region on edge. As Washington said, America did not seek conflict with Iran, but would not hesitate to protect its forces and Israel. Now, to discuss the latest developments, let's go across to Saurabh Shukla, Editor-in-Chief, newsmobile.in, who joins us live from Washington at the moment. Thank you so much, Mr. Shukla, for joining us. Now, Israel and Iran, the two enemies, are closer to the brink of an all-out war than ever before. These attacks, unlike others in the past, explicitly and directly came from the Iranian government and its military. Now, we're also hearing the US is speaking to Jordan. What are the latest developments you can share with us?
Well, I can tell you that hectic diplomatic parlays, back channels are on both here in Washington, D.C. and in some of the other G7 capitals. In fact, in New Delhi as well, as you said in the broadcast, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar has been proactively speaking to his counterparts in the middle of an Indian election. Clearly, everyone wants, and US and India are coordinating. I can share with your viewers very, very closely on this, because they both believe that there should be de-escalation from here on. The world cannot have another war happening in the Middle East or anywhere else in the world. In any case, you are reeling under a war between Russia and Ukraine. You have a war between Israel and Hamas, and then this comes in. So the world cannot afford that. And that's a message coming from the UN Security Council as well. Clearly, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is, his stance on this entire thing is also powered by the domestic problem that he's facing. And that's a worry that many observers here in Washington, D.C. have as well, because they know that they have cautioned him that he should not escalate. They should hold on the parallel track. With the Iranians also, parleys are on to say, to make sure that they should not escalate either. And that's the reason why you see that assurance coming from the Iranian side that they will not mount any further attacks. Clearly, there is a better sense, I hope, that will prevail in Tel Aviv as well, because Israel also cannot afford any other war at this stage, because obviously it's reeling under a crisis of sorts, and it should avoid a war. Because a war in the Middle East impacts the world, whether it's an economic impact, the humanitarian impact, that will be disastrous. And that's the reason why efforts are on today to make sure that this war can be averted. Parmeshwar?
But Mr. Shukla, many say that Mr. Netanyahu could use this Iran attack as an opportunity to do what he always wanted: hit Iran hard, drawing the US into war, and regain regional and international legitimacy. What's your take?
Well, I can tell you from my sources here at White House, and also from some of the other G7 interlocutors I've been speaking to, clearly, none of them are backing Israel on that. While they have said that, yes, we will back Israel to the extent that if there is any further action, they will defend. And they were all standing with Israel. If you know that Israel was able to avert this, these missile and drones coming its way, thanks to a proactive support by the US. So they've told them that we will stand with you, but we don't want you to go and further escalate this situation. That's a clear message going from Washington to Tel Aviv. And I think Mr. Netanyahu should understand that this is not the time to escalate, and this is not the time to take on Iran either, because the world does not have an appetite for that, for clear pragmatic reasons. Parmeshwar?
Right. Despite pressure from US sanctions, though, we can't ignore the fact that Iran does have quite an extensive array of weapons at its disposal. But the key question here then, Mr. Shukla, though, is whether this all drags in the United States, leading to a full-scale shooting war between Iran and the US forces in the region.
Well, that's what they want to avoid. They're very clear that while the US has said clearly that if their assets are hit, if there is a direct attack by Iran or Iranian proxies, that includes groups like Hezbollah, with Hamas, if there is a direct attack, certainly US will resort to counter measures. But the way what I'm trying to tell you is that there is a back channel effort happening with Iran as well to make sure that they see the reason, because obviously Iran also realizes that in a war situation, it's not going to emerge victorious because there are very few countries which are standing with Iran at this moment. This is the message that came out of External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar's conversation with his Iranian counterpart as well, that you should exercise restraint. You should make sure that the situation is not escalated, because a war is not going to be good for anyone. And obviously for India, which has clear strategic stakes in the region, it also wants that it stands with countries like the US to make sure that there is a solution, a diplomatic solution of this crisis. Parameshwar?
Indeed. Mr. Shukla, though, do you believe that by launching this midnight attack on Israel, the Iranians are telling their rivals that they indeed are ready to escalate the shadow war into an open conflict?
Well, the Iranian argument is that this was a response to the Israeli attack on its, the Damascus attack by Israeli forces. And clearly they wanted to send a message that, listen, we are here and we will retaliate. And post that, they have obviously, any attack was unwarranted. They were also being told that don't escalate the situation, hold on. But certainly there are internal dynamics. The fact that Revolutionary Guards, their members got killed in these attacks, there was pressure on the Iranian leadership as well to respond. They've done that. Good thing is that these attacks were averted, so the message is gone. From here on, I think it makes ample sense for them as well, ample diplomatic sense, because if Iran has to get some kind of a, it obviously has got international condemnation, but it has to avoid any further coercive measures by the global community. It has to stand down. And I think that message is being conveyed very strongly from Washington, and that message is being understood. This is my understanding in Tehran as well.
Right. You've been emphasizing on the rising tension between Iran and Israel that's closely being watched by New Delhi, by India. Any escalations also likely to have a significant economic impact, don't you believe?
Absolutely. Whether it's the oil prices, whether the trade route, that India is currently in the midst of negotiations to make sure that Indian sailors are set free, because Iran has seized the vessel in which Indian sailors are there. All that will have a major impact. Any war will also mean that there will be disruption in aviation. Some airlines will be forced to divert, their routes. All that has a huge economic impact. India has a huge diaspora in the Middle East. Certainly at this moment when India is in the middle of election, certainly they don't want a big digression coming its way where India has to resort to, another evacuation mission, which will be obviously will also mean more economic pressure on the government of India as well.
In fact, when the Israel-Hamas war broke out, oil prices soared and threatened to breach the $100 a barrel mark. And now Iran's attack on Israel seems to be adding fuel to the fire. As always, Mr. Shukla, thank you so much for your time. Israel, for now, is quiet on its next steps against Iran. The White House, as Mr. Shukla has also taken us through, has warned Israel that the US will not participate in any retaliatory strikes on Iran for now. But Israel has been successful in warding off the first wave of Iranian air attacks, even though Iran says it's done now. But they used ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and killer drones. There have been no reports of mass casualties, as we have been extensively reporting on the ground, nor are there reports of major damage to property or buildings. Israel, as you know, has a tiered missile defense system amongst the most sophisticated ever developed. And these are the major components of the system which have evidently worked in making the interceptions. Vishnu Shom explains this.
The outer perimeter of Israel's tiered defense is through the Arrow missile system. This engages inbound ballistic missiles outside the atmosphere. Targets are usually intercepted outside Israeli territory. The next line of defenses comes from a system called the David Sling. The David Sling system, which includes a missile called the Stunner, intercepts aircraft, tactical ballistic missiles, and long-range rockets at ranges between 40 and 300 kilometers. The US-made Patriot surface-to-air missile system forms the inner circle of the tiered defensive system. It was first used in the 1991 Gulf War to intercept missiles launched at Israel from Saddam Hussein's Iraq. The inner defensive perimeter is maintained by the Iron Dome system, widely used to recently intercept rockets fired by Hamas into Israel. The system is designed to intercept and destroy short-range rockets and artillery shells at close range. The final defenses will come from an under-development high-energy laser beam called the Iron Beam. This is designed to make intercepts from a few hundred meters out to several kilometers.
Also, here's a deep dive with my colleague Vishal into the group believed to be behind Iran's attack on Israel.
The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the IRGC, launched ballistic missiles and drones at Israel late on Saturday. The group calls the shots in Iran and has become quite powerful in the last 4 decades. So what is the IRGC? It was formed soon after the Islamic Revolution in Iran in 1979 to protect the Shiite Muslim clerical ruling system. It is a dominant force comprising of more than 1,25,000 people, and it has its own army, navy, air force and intelligence wing. It was set up as a counter to Iran's regular armed forces. The US labeled the group a terrorist group in 2019. It was the first time the US formally labeled another country's military a terrorist group. So how influential is the IRGC, or the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps? Its importance can be gauged from the fact that it oversees Iran's ballistic missile program. Experts suggest that this ballistic missile program is largest in the Middle East. The group also exerts its influence on Iran's politics, as most of President Ibrahim Raisi's cabinet are former IRGC officers. The group also plays a wider role in the region, as it founded the heavily armed Hezbollah group in Lebanon in 1982. Hezbollah has repeatedly engaged with Israel in the race in the recent past, showing how influential the IRGC is.
Well, let's turn our attention now to Canada, where a 24-year-old student from India was shot dead inside a car in Canada's South Vancouver. This is what the local police has now confirmed. The Vancouver police, in a statement, has said Chirag Antil was found dead inside a vehicle in the area after neighbours reported hearing gunshots. Now, Chirag Antil's brother, Romit Antil, a Haryana resident, has told reporters that Chirag seemed happy when they spoke on the phone in the morning, but Chirag later took out his Audi to go somewhere, and that was when he was unfortunately shot dead. Well, as per reports, Chirag came to Vancouver in September 2022. He had just finished an MBA at the University Canada West and recently got his work permit. In other news, ex-US President Donald Trump's court trials involving hush money paid to the adult film star Stormy Daniels is set to begin. This makes him the first US president to be put on trial, an uncharted territory for the country. Trump is accused of arranging a $130,000 payment made in the waning days of the 2016 presidential election campaign in the US, buying her silence about an alleged sexual encounter at a hotel back in 2006, and falsifying records to cover it up. He has denied any extramarital encounter with the porn star and has said that the payment was made to stop her false and extortionist accusations. Well, on the China watch, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has touched down in China for a 3-day diplomatic visit that includes meetings with the Chinese leader Xi Jinping. Accompanied by a high-level business delegation, the German leader is expected to address grievances over the trade deficit between the EU common market and the world's second-largest economy. In fact, Mr. Scholz is expected to question China's ties with Russia amid the Ukraine war and Beijing's aggressiveness towards Taiwan, which, as you are aware, is a self-ruled island China claims as its own. This, by the way, is Mr. Scholz's second trip to China as Chancellor. He completed his first visit back in 2022. Well, we're slipping into a very short break, but on the other side, we get you a detailed explainer on how the year where almost half the world's population is set to go to polls. It's also a year where more and more instances of election meddling are coming to light. Gauri Dwivedi has more after this very short break.
Co-President
आईपीएल का हल्ला बल्ला और सबसे शानदार कवरेज सिर्फ एनडीटीवी पर।
NDTV wins big at NBAR. With 43 awards, NDTV reigns supreme. Sanjay Pugalia takes home the award for Editor-in-Chief of the Year. Santosh Kumar wins Managing Editor of the Year. Vishnu Som, Maria Shakil and Sumit Avasthi take home the top honours for the Anchors of the Year. BSI, Hum Log and We the People all take home awards. And NDTV 24/7 takes home News Channel of the Year award. NDTV stands for trust.
Welcome back. Well, our External Affairs Minister has spoken to his Iranian counterpart, and after these talks, we can share with you that the Indian government will now be meeting the MSC Aries crew. Iran has allowed Indian government officials to meet the ship crew, and as we have been reporting, 17 Indians are on the ship that has been seized by Iran. Well, in other news, it's the year where almost half of the world's population is set to go to polls. It's also a year where more and more instances of election meddling are coming to light. Gauri Dwivedi explains.
2024 is the year where almost half of the world's population is set to go to polls. It's also a year where more and more instances of election meddling are coming to light. What this means, which are the countries affected by it, and will technology make this trend even more dangerous and weaken democratic processes around the world, is what we will discuss in today's edition of Decode. I am Gauri Dwivedi. Election meddling is where foreign agents that may or may not be related to any government try to affect a democratic election process by influencing the issues on which the election is fought, or swaying the narrative, or impacting the actual voter turnout. Increasingly, governments are accusing each other of interfering in their national elections. The latest is Canada accusing China of meddling in its 2019 and 2021 national elections, both of which incidentally were won by Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party. Trudeau testified in the public inquiry on foreign interference that China had tried to meddle, but insisted that Beijing was not able to effect the final election outcome. It's alleged China wanted Trudeau to form a minority government to reduce his leverage for any future action that would be taken against China on matters related to national security or trade. But it's not just Canada. US, UK and India, the three most significant democracies on the planet, are all set to go to elections this year, and all are at a heightened risk of being impacted due to foreign interference. Microsoft has warned that in the Indian elections, at a minimum, China will create and distribute through social media AI-generated content that benefits their positions in these high-profile elections. Any meddling in India's election process is bound to have larger national security implications. Perhaps that's why China is interested in meddling. Microsoft believes China has already used this template in Taiwan's January 2024 elections and will replicate the same for the high-stakes India polls. In February 2024, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence in the United States issued a threat assessment and said Beijing is expanding its global covert influence posture to better support the CCP's goals. The PRC aims to sow doubts about US leadership, undermine democracy, and extend Beijing's influence. In short, Beijing is trying to do in USA and India what it did in Taiwan, or perhaps what Russia is alleged to have done in the 2016 American elections. The UK, which is set to go to elections towards the end of 2024, faces similar threats from Russia, China, and Iran. The idea for such a well-planned and coordinated exercise is to promote divisions in the society at a time when elections exacerbate such differences. There's actually now a term for it, known as spamouflage, where covert accounts masquerading as voters of a party run down genuine supporters of any opponent using everything from conspiracy theories to falsehoods. And while most of this meddling happens via advanced technology tools, democracies are grappling for answers. On 2nd of April 2024, US President Joe Biden warned his Chinese counterpart to not interfere in the American elections to be held end of 2024. But the fact that such a call was necessary indicates the problem that countries like US, India, and UK face, and the limited solutions in their arsenal. Technology, as it empowers, also exposes the loopholes that exist in our societies. As AI becomes more sophisticated, election meddling will become more widespread and possibly difficult to trace. Reports suggest there is an AI-generated Biden-like figurine trying to influence American voters. Doubt and suspicion about the democratic process thrive in the absence of clarity, requiring governments to respond real-time to every such threat. If Justin Trudeau had acted in time on the intel inputs, the Chinese efforts to interfere would have been nipped in the bud. After all, countries like Indonesia, Maldives, South Africa, Mexico, Venezuela, and a whole host of others will all take cue from how democracies like US, India, and UK respond to the growing and all-pervasive foreign interference threat.
Well, thank you for investing your time in watching the first episode of The World 24/7 on the NDTV network. We'll continue to track the latest updates for you from India and around the world. Do stay tuned.